stories tell the tale of some of the worst dark web crimes committed over the last decade. The victims had no idea what they were signing up for. Imagine you're just starting out your modeling career. You want to be in the spotlight, but you don't have all those good connections yet, but you have a good agent, and you seem to be in good hands. Suddenly, he gets you a booking for a photo shooting in Milan. Sounds like the dream, right? Unfortunately, for 20-year-old Chloe Ayling, it was her worst nightmare. This story begins in 2017 in London, UK. Chloe was working for Phil Green's supermodel agency. Green was a lawyer and a part-time DJ. A newspaper painted a not-so-great picture of his business. He runs the sleazy agency from his family home, while a registered office telephone number is simply on divert to a mobile. Although not the top model agent, he had good connections and a few successful clients. Chloe trusted him. In March 2017, Green sent Chloe to a photo shooting in Paris. There, Chloe met Lukasz Herba, a 30-year-old Polish programmer from Oldbury, UK. He had organized the photo shoot, which turned out to be a complete failure. But Chloe and her agent didn't think much of it. He was just bad at business, they thought. Unfortunately, that would be a terrible mistake. Skip to July 2017. Chloe gets a call from Phil Green. Lukasz is going under the alias Andre Lazio, which he'd used in Paris too. He wanted Chloe to come to a photo shoot in Milan. This is what Green writes in his book now.
The required information was given to me by the photographer, including a picture of the studio, Google Map locations, details of surrounding streets, confirmation of makeup artist and stylist. Chloe had also met the photographer before.
Sure. Only the studio didn't exist.
And he was able to admit to my mum on the phone after I didn't turn up from Milan that he called other agencies in Milan and they all told him that the studio doesn't exist. Right. So if it took a basic check like that after I was there, why couldn't he have done that before?
Phil Green sent Chloe to Milan with promises of a good photo shoot. So on July 12th, she packed her bags, kissed her mom goodbye, and flew over to the location they'd given her. When she arrived in front of the studio, no one was there.
It was when I walked into the studio and there was just silence. Normally someone would greet you at the door, close to the door, but I just didn't hear anything. So that's why when I saw the door saying studio on it, I went to open it, but before I had the time to quickly process my thoughts, that is exactly when the masked man put his arm around my neck and my mouth and nose.
While Chloe was simply trying to open the door to the studio, a man came from behind her and pressed hard on her neck and mouth so she couldn't scream for help. Another masked man came from the side and injected Chloe with in her wrist. She was panicking, but soon she was out.
When you saw that syringe, I mean, this happened in seconds. When you saw that syringe in his hand, what was going through your mind?
Absolute panic. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know why they were doing it.
Chloe, now passed out, was put inside a black bag in the trunk of a car and drove around for dozens of miles.
So I was like, I'm gonna die, like I'm not gonna come out of this alive.
Chloe woke up while she was still in the trunk, handcuffed, folded inside a dark, narrow bag, and her mouth duct taped shut.
I opened my eyes and I have like restriction on my mouth. Like I didn't know what it was at first. I had hands in my handcuffs and I was like trying to feel where I am. I heard the engine, so I knew I was in a moving car.
Chloe tried to shout and get out of the bag, but the radio was playing very loud music inside the car. Chloe kept calling for the driver, louder and louder, until they pulled over.
Then I was still asking questions when they came round.
Were they still masked?
They were still masked at this point, yeah.
But you were able to see something in the back of that car, a suitcase.
Yeah, it was when they put the pullover, I saw through the gap that they'd put an empty suitcase above it. And at that point, I thought that I was going to die because what other reason would they put an empty suitcase about my size on top?
But the men returned to the wheel and drove off. They took Chloe to a remote farmhouse in Viu, near Turin. They dragged her into the house and tied her to a piece of furniture. Finally, they took their masks off. It was Lukasz and Michael Herba, two brothers. Chloe had seen Lukasz in Paris and was finally piecing it together. This had been a long, creepy, premeditated plan. Michael was renting out the farmhouse from a man called Fabrizio. Michael claimed he was an artist looking for an isolated spot to focus on his work.
This is where she slept?
UK.
Handcuffed.
Handcuffed, please.
Did the neighbours notice anything at all? Did they see them?
They saw them eating, doing the shopping, as if they lived together normally, a couple on holidays.
So, if Chloe was being handcuffed to a wardrobe, how come she was going out with the brothers? Well, here's where it gets truly creepy. Lucas convinced Chloe that he and Michael were part of a nasty, notorious crime gang called the Black Death. Lucas convinced Chloe he was going to sell her as a sex slave at an auction on the dark web.
He said I would be sold to somewhere in the Middle East and that the men would use the girls for about 3 months, pass them around to all the relatives and friends, and then when they're eventually bored of the girls, and they just feed them to the tigers.
Chloe was terrified and compelled to do Chloe not to try to escape for fear of the Black Death finding her one way or another.
And even the 3 weeks I was kept in Milan by the police, I still was like living in fear, like I had no security or anything. I was like, there's other people out there. The guy that saved me is in jail, but the bad guys, the Romanians that took me, they're still out there.
There weren't any other bad guys, Romanian mafia or Black Death gang. In fact, it was just 2 psychotic brothers with a very dark fantasy.
And then you find out that this is all in his head. This is that none of this is true.
I know, it was because I believed it so much, and then obviously that was such a reassurance to hear that that wasn't the case, because I was just thinking I've got to do everything he tells me to.
But before going down, Lucas had one more trick up his sleeve. He told the police that he and Chloe had dreamed up this plan together as a publicity stunt. He added that he was in love with Chloe and that the plan was inspired from a movie called By Any Means. The worst part was that people believed this. When Chloe returned to the UK, she was being scrutinized by the media for faking her story for fame and glory. People said that Chloe sharing Lucas's bed or holding hands in the CCTV footage proved she was in on it. Excuse me, what? Anyone who has read about kidnap cases knows that a key survival method is playing along with the kidnapper's fantasy. Fear and the desire to escape can make a person do many things. Some people also noted Chloe's calm and composed way of discussing her nightmarish days, but they didn't see her then.
And I was in Italy for 3 weeks before I actually came home to the UK, so I had what people here didn't witness was me crying almost every day, me being too paranoid to leave my room. Any noises I hear, I would freak out, having nightmares. No one here witnessed that.
Finally, on June 11th, 2018, Lucas Herba was convicted of kidnapping and sentenced to 16 years and 9 months in prison. Michael was also sentenced to 16 years, but in 2021, his sentence was reduced to 5 years and 8 months on the grounds of Michael only being an accessory. With both brothers in jail, Chloe could finally get some closure, as well as the UK's media trust. However, she will never be able to trust people the same way again. Lucas acted as her savior, rescuing her from a giant organization that he in fact made up. He was her kidnapper, and yet he convinced her he was the good guy. It's a horrible story that Chloe will have to live with forever. This story is about to get as dark as a story can get. It begins with a boy called Peter, who was violated by a priest in Victoria, Australia. He grew up into a man, got married in Melbourne, and had 2 kids. Things seemed alright, except he could never really shake off a bad feeling. He couldn't stand being good. In 2011, Peter Scully mysteriously fled to the Philippines. He was about to be charged with a real estate scam that could cost investors over $2.6 million. Also, he was operating an unlicensed escort service that offered his then Filipina girlfriend as a worker. The Philippines were a place Scully could start fresh, but he wasn't looking for any fresh start. In fact, he liked the Philippines because he felt he could do whatever he wanted. It was then that he truly let his evil unfold. Scully was about to create one of the largest dark web child pornography rings in history, and he would be the one to violate and torture the victims in the videos.
The first case is the slavery, the fact that he's kept 2 young girls in a house and sexually abused them, tied them in dog chains and allegedly made videos of them. That's one case. The second case involves the holding of young victims and sexually abusing them, and then it went to violence against the young victims as well as abuse, and then unfortunately and horrifically ended in the death of one of the the victims.
But he wasn't alone in the horror he caused on Mindanao Island. He had recruited 2 Filipino girlfriends, Carme Ann Alvarez and Lizelle Margallo. Both of them were teenagers and suffered abuse. Carme Ann was a child too, and Lizelle had also been trafficked as a child.
He said to me, "Can we adopt some street kids?" And I said, I don't know, I don't think so. What if my sister to live with us? He said to me, "No, I don't want your sister. I want street kid to help them."
Carme Ann was slowly getting the gist of what Scully wanted, but she didn't want to believe the reality of it. Half of her ignorant, half of her eager to do what others had once been done to her. Carme Ann became a trusted accomplice of Scully's.
Then I meet these 2 kids. Then I say to these kids, "You want to come with me?" And then the kids say, "Yes."
Scully had even asked Carme Ann for kids of a very specific age, 9 and 12. When Carme Ann brought the 2 girls to Scully's house with the promise of food, Scully had them drink alcohol and perform sexual acts between them. The girls tried to run, so Scully had a plan for them. First, he tied them up in dog chains overnight.
The following day after breakfast, we were asked to dig a grave.
Why did you have to do that? What were you told would happen to you?
That we will be buried in the graves that we are digging.
The girls knew they had nowhere to run. Scully and Carme Ann would make sure they wouldn't make it out alive. Over the following days, Scully would rape and torture the cousins, all while filming everything. Carme Ann ensured the girls' silence.
Carme Ann told me to shut up, and she covered my face with pillows so I won't scream.
5 days into their ordeal, Carme Ann softened at the sight of the girls in dog chains and freed them. But Rosie and her cousin were only 2 of Scully's many victims, and they were among the oldest. Scully had made a website called No Limits Fun, or NLF. There he would offer pay-per-view video streams of the worst kind. Tragically, he had clients from all over the world.
Or the member of the group will tell him to do, he will do, to the point of, killing the child in the course of the sexual abuse.
And who are those people? Where do they come from?
From UK, Germany, and US.
One of Scully's loyal customers was fellow Australian Matthew Graham, one of the biggest ever purveyors of child pornography. In 2012, Scully posted his worst video yet, called Daisy's Destruction. People paid $10,000 for this evil film, showing 3 girls repeatedly violated and tortured by Scully and his 2 girlfriends. Soon, Matthew Graham bought the video and made it public, hoping to profit from it as well. Finally, the police got a glimpse into the horrifying reality of Scully's enterprise.
A video had surfaced in Europe, and that video involved a white male and Asian females molesting children, very young children, as young as 2 and even younger. That video was called Daisy's Destruction, and there was a series of these videos.
Immediately, police around the world started working on this case. They had to find Scully and his accomplices before they would destroy any more lives. It was a worldwide hunt for Scully. First, the Dutch police isolated the location of the video to the Philippines. Then, at least 8 local children were identified as victims. Then, Australian Federal Police Detective Paul Hopkins stepped in, recognizing Scully's Australian accent and promising to find and arrest him.
Said, "I'm so sorry, it appears to be an Australian." And that's awful. So that's how the case came together. It just came together by everyone doing their little bit. And finally then, as the hunt for him was on.
Just around this time, Carme Ann had freed Rosie and her cousin, finally starting to feel some remorse for her actions. Girls headed straight for the Filipino police and told them everything. Now the local police could collaborate with Paul Hopkins and the AFP. Paul Hopkins tracked Scully to Malay Balay City. While they were on his tail and he kept dodging them, the officers were also going house to house, investigating exactly where the abuse had taken place.
So far identified 15 filming locations, and the NBI have identified 5 houses at least.
The police matched the backgrounds from the videos against the stairs, tiles, and windows in the houses. Then the police searched for the victims in the video. Daisy, who was only 18 months old at the time of the video, Cindy, who was 11, and Liza, who was 12. All three girls had been handed over to Scully by their families, fooled that Scully would house, feed, and educate them. Daisy had been miraculously rescued by her family, but the other two girls were nowhere to be found. Eventually, Liza was found. She had survived and was back at school. Tragically, Cindy's remains would be found under the tiles of one of Scully's houses of horror.
It's awful. It's just terrible. That's incredibly bad.
After violating and torturing her for days, Scully made Cindy dig her own grave, then strangled her with a rope and threw her in. Everything was filmed and sold on the dark web. On February 20th, 2015, the Australian and Filipino police barged into Scully's home. They had finally found him.
20th of February, 4 years after fleeing Australia and committing unspeakable crimes, this is the moment Scully is caught.
Give me your name.
It's Peter Scully.
What?
It's Peter Scully.
Peter Scully.
We have 6 warrants for your arrest.
Scully didn't resist or deny the claims. Peter Scully was charged on 75 accounts and faced trial alongside 4 men who helped with making the videos. He was given life in prison, just like Carman and Liza. Margaret Acullo, the project coordinator for the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, said that this case was the worst she had ever heard of. Everyone involved in the case said that they still have nightmares when remembering the evil video. Scully's crimes were so severe and so extreme, the prosecutors supported the reintroduction of the death penalty in the Philippines, just for his case. When reporter Tara Brown visited Scully in jail for the 60 Minutes feature, he remains defiant and unwilling to discuss whatever made him feel uncomfortable.
Why would you abuse an 18-month-old child?
Well, for a start, I didn't. And
well, that's not true, is it?
It is true. No, I'm sorry, you're wrong.
Oh, I'm sorry. How old was she?
He either mocked Tara, avoided questions, or outright told Tara she should read his memoir when he publishes it. Scully left dozens of children forever struggling to cope with the horror of what they went through.
Do you think you'll ever be able to get over the events there in that house? Do you think you'll ever be happy again and not think about them?
I hope I can forget when I grow up.
This last story takes us to the FBI. One day in 2015, the FBI got a tip about an illegal dark website.
One of the users of the BDM site saw this advertisement and then reported it to law enforcement because he believed that it was illegal and it was wrong.
It was a Malaysian website advertising slaves. The case fell into the hands of the FBI department in Phoenix, Arizona, and one of the undercover detectives working to stop trafficking discovered something strange about the website.
So we started investigating that and found out that it was just fraud. They just wanted money sent to them, and then they would not send any slaves.
The Malaysian website was a scam, a very creepy scam indeed, but this gave the FBI an idea.
Whoever was selling those slaves, their server was based out of Phoenix. So that's how we ended up with the complaint.
What if they were to make a phony slave website as a sort of lure for perverts all over the country?
After we ruled out the fact that this organization in Malaysia was a hoax, was a fraud scheme, we didn't think that the investigation should end there, and the reason why was because we had identified over 100 potential targets in the US who had at least expressed an interest in purchasing and controlling a person permanently against their will.
That's right, over 100 men had tried buying a slave just from this Malaysian website. So the FBI used this domain to create their own fake website.
We had undercover officers pose as kidnapped females, posted photos, but we blacked out their face. We put ads on the same websites that the Malaysian ads were on S&M websites. We posted those with an email address, and when they emailed us interest, we gave them a phone number and had a phone conversation.
What the officers would uncover was beyond creepy. The undercover officer carrying out the phone conversations made it very clear that they were selling non-consenting women. None of the men had any problems with that. In fact, that's exactly what they were looking for.
The entire time of the investigation, every conversation that our undercover had with the subject, he mentioned during that conversation the fact that these females were kidnapped and these females were non-consenting, and that everything that we were doing was illegal.
The first two arrests were Edward Kendall and Edward Stevens from Arizona. They both turned up with thousands of dollars in cash at the given location. The police went over to the Stevens home and found ropes, chains, handcuffs, and any means of keeping someone in prison that you can imagine.
This was their prize, and this was something that they had been aspiring to obtain for a long time and that they had dreamt of for a long time.
Their next arrest was Charles Bunnell, an ex-convict from California. He had a previous conviction for kidnapping and assaulting a prostitute. On the phone with the undercover agent, Bunnell spoke in great detail about his plans with his slave.
He said that his primary use that he would use the woman for was for sex. He intended to have sex with the woman as many times as he could, every day of the week.
Bunnell drove to the location in a stolen car. Inside the car, the police found the creepiest kidnap kit. He had everything from shackles and leather restraints to zip ties and chains. Worst of all, he had brought a drug infamously called Devil's Breath. This renders the victim completely passive and unable to say no to commands. They're still conscious, but they are in a zombie-like state with no free will. If this wasn't horrible enough, the FBI made an even more terrifying arrest. Stephen Currents from Montana. Currents had made his own sex dungeon after his wife died, and he started abusing alcohol.
He actually had a basement, and in that basement he had it looked like a dungeon.
He had a whole lot of BDSM type objects. You know, he had whips, he had paddles, he had chairs, straps.
Before flying over to Arizona, he asked the undercover cop to measure the wrists and ankles of his chosen victims. The officer gave him some measurements and asked him why he wanted these.
And Mr. Curran said that he intended to fashion U-bolts to their ankles and to their wrists.
Moreover, he explained all his plans over the phone.
Wherever they go in the house, they're going to have a chain, and there's going to be a place on the floor that it locks into so that they're limited on how much distance they can move. It'll fit into a piercing in their body.
He had actually made all the arrangements, with chains set in the floor and extending only to the nearby bathroom. Outrageously enough, Currents even told the undercover officer that he had a plan for when people came over to his place.
The other thing I decided too is that when anybody comes over, I'm going to have the girls upstairs and put away, and then I will put gags on them, and I'll use those cage gags to go on the head so they can't open their mouth and they can drink water. And that's it. I don't want someone getting pissed off at me and calling the cops.
Yeah, like that was the real problem. Someone getting upset at him. The FBI's sting was a big success. Unfortunately, it's also a reminder of the terrible things that are happening on the dark web. Thanks for watching, you guys. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more real horror stories. Until next time, sleep tight.
There are times when this world drifts so close to the fabric of reality that I can hear something calling me from beyond the veil. Sometimes when I get too close, I can feel that thing on the other side tugging at the corners of my mind. I'm worried about Carlos. He doesn't seem to be taking this so well. In case you don't know, I work at this shitty gas station at the edge of our small town, and weird things have been happening for as long as I've been here. I've only started to tell some of my stories, and if you haven't caught up, then I invite you to listen to the previous parts. When I returned to work after my post yesterday, I was delighted to find a stack of receipt papers sitting neatly on the register counter with notes written on them in shaky handwriting. I don't remember writing all the notes, but then again, I don't remember a lot of things. It is possible that I'm working too hard, or maybe the fumes coming from beneath the gas station are playing tricks on me. Or perhaps it's just another side effect of my condition. At any rate, I'm not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, or any other animal in any other orifice for that matter. Admittedly, my handwriting isn't the best, and at times the scratch on the receipt paper becomes nearly illegible, so if anything herein seems unbelievable, it's probably because I read it wrong. With that in mind, this is my best effort at a transcription. 7. It's getting dark earlier these days. 7:30. Farmer Jr. came into the gas station tonight, asking about the hand plants. I told him that they weren't there anymore. He left his number scribbled on the back of a coupon for 15% off bulk pig feed from an online retailer. I think he's trying to send me a message. 9. I think maybe some kids are playing a prank on me. I found a lawn gnome behind the pork rinds. I didn't think much about it and put him in a box behind the counter. But then I found another matching lawn gnome in the soda case. I added this one to the box as well. It wasn't until I noticed the third and fourth lawn gnomes that I started to suspect something. I had taken out the garbage and found the gnomes perched atop the branch of a tree next to the dumpster, staring down at me like gargoyles. I used a chair and broom to knock them down, and I put them in a box with the other 3. When I got back to my desk, I found a note on my chair written in red ink. I don't know who wrote it, but the paper smells like oranges and plumeria. 10. There's a strange scratching noise coming from the tiles above the cash register. I fear Rocco and his brood may have infiltrated the building again. 11. Farmer Jr. called the store. He asked about the hand plants. I assured him that they weren't there anymore, and if they ever showed up again, I would call him. I think he's beginning to suspect that I'm lying. 12. One of the cultist recruits walked in from the community in the woods. They hate it when I call them cultists. I know the recruits aren't supposed to interact with the outside world, but from time to time they'll sneak into town, never any further than the gas station, and buy cigarettes. They aren't supposed to try and recruit new members until they graduate to the honorable senior cultist status. But this one isn't a very good cultist. I know they aren't supposed to have names, but I'm going to call this one Marlboro. I'll let you guess why. Marlboro stayed in the store for at least an hour, trying to convince me to go back to the compound with him. They hate it when I call their home a compound. He tried to appeal to my logical side, but I let him know politely but firmly that I was not interested in logic. I can't remember when he left. 2. I found myself digging again. Sometimes, on slow nights, I let myself drift. My mind goes somewhere, and when I come to, I wonder, where was I just now? Who was that controlling my body while I was gone? My body does those things I've done so many times before that I guess it's learned how to do them without me. My body restocked the cigarettes, my body rotated the frozen drink machine, my body scraped the mold off the bottom of the ice buckets, my body emptied the rat traps, and somewhere along the way, found a shovel, went out back, and started digging a hole. Well, actually, I shouldn't say my body started digging. I have been, or rather, my body has been digging this hole off and on for the last few months. Usually I come to after a few shovelfuls. This time, I added another foot deep before I snapped back to reality and asked myself, what the hell am I doing? 3:30. I just noticed a door at the end of the hallway past the walk-in cooler. How long have I worked here and never noticed that door before? It seems disappointingly ordinary as far as doors go, except for the fact that it's warm to the touch and feels like it's vibrating. I tried the handle, but it's locked. When I got back to my register, I noticed a man in a trench coat standing outside beyond the gas pumps, just outside the reach of our lights, dangerously close to the road. I can't tell if he's looking at me, or if he's looking past the building at the woods on the other side. I wish he wouldn't stand there like that, stoic and still, with his arms reaching down past his knees. The scratching against the tiles in the ceiling over the counter is getting louder. 3:45. A man came into the store, rolling a large ice chest behind him. He had sunken blue eyes, wiry hair coming from his nose and ears, long bony fingers, and paper-thin skin, revealing every blue and green vein beneath the translucent dermis. He wore a bowler cap and smelled like milk. I'd definitely never seen him around before. He asked if I would be interested in partnering up with him. He sold ground meat at discount prices. But I told him that our store doesn't do well in the fresh foods category, recommending he try his hand at making jerky. Before he left, he scooped out about a pound or so of raw ground meat from his ice chest into a piece of parchment paper and gave it to me as a sample. Once he left, I took the meat into the cooler, where I found another lawn gnome waiting for me. I put the gnome into the box with the other 7. 4. Carlos just told me something very strange about Kiefer. 4:30. There's a kid named Spencer Middleton who went to the same high school as me and Kiefer. Spencer was just a year ahead of me, but looked much older and acted much younger. I live in a small town. Small towns get bored. For entertainment, some turn to gossip, some turn to more sinister pastimes. The latter often fueled the former. There were rumors around town that Spencer liked to torture and kill animals. Rumors that Spencer's parents and siblings always locked their bedroom doors when they went to sleep at night. The rumors didn't slow down any after the fire at Spencer's house, where Spencer was the only one who escaped unscathed. I once saw Spencer gleefully step on a lizard, throw his head back and laugh. Some short time after his house caught fire for the second time, Spencer left town. The story went that he had gone off and joined the army. I didn't want to think about that, so I simply didn't think about that. I would have been perfectly happy to never think about that, but after all these years, I'm forced to, because Spencer Middleton just came into the store and bought a cup of coffee. He's sitting at one of the booths, talking to Kiefer. Marbro's back. He asked if I could spare him some time to talk about his fake religion. They hate it when I call it a fake religion. I told him he had to leave. He seemed upset. 4:45. Spencer and Kiefer sat around for a while and didn't buy anything but 2 cups of coffee. When they finally left, I let Carlos know. He had been hiding under a blanket in the walk-in cooler, although I can't really understand why. Carlos explained to me exactly what happened. He finished his shift a couple of nights ago, and had just left the gas station when he saw Kiefer's SUV pulled over in a ditch at the bottom of the hill. Carlos, being the good guy he is, decided to check and see if Kiefer needed any help. He says that when he pulled up and got out of his car, he could hear what sounded like a loud crunching noise coming from just beyond the tree line. Carlos went to investigate. That's when he saw something. When I asked Carlos what he saw, he just started speaking Spanish in a fast, panicked sort of way. I don't speak Spanish, but I nodded along empathetically. The only word I could pick up was strega, which is the name of a liquor we carry. Whatever it was Carlos saw, it made him race back to his car as fast as he could and back out quickly without looking, and that's when he ran over Kiefer. Carlos is a good guy, but here he was in a bad situation. He stopped long enough to get out, check on Kiefer, and confirm that he was definitely dead. There was nothing he could do about it. There was nothing he could do to change that fact. It was an accident. Carlos was on parole. There was that thing in the woods, and Carlos had to make a decision. He heaved the body into the trunk of his car and drove off. Carlos took me to his car and showed me the body. I can confirm 100% that it was Kiefer in the trunk of his car. Not just because of his unmistakable face, but also because of his phone and wallet that were in his pockets. 5. I finally got tired of the scratching and pulled out a ladder from the storage to see what the raccoons were doing in the ceiling, but when I pushed back the tile, the only thing up there was another gnome. That makes a dozen so far. 6. The man in the trench coat was standing outside. The cultist came back, demanding an audience with me, insisting that if I would just listen to him, I would see that his reasoning is superb and flawless, and that I would be a fool not to join him in his perfection of logic and nirvana that is his belief structure. I agreed to listen to his pitch if he would agree to ask the man in the trench coat to leave. Our hasty verbal contract in place, I steeled myself to listen. Honestly, he did make a few good points, but I suppose that's to be expected from a viral thought experiment strong enough to convince perfectly normal people to abandon their real lives and go live in the commune in the woods past the shitty gas station on the edge of town. They call themselves the Mathematists. They believe that humankind exists to fulfill 2 moral impravities, to decrease suffering and to increase happiness. A successful life increases happiness more than suffering. A decent life decreases suffering more than happiness. How good a person is can be determined by the spread between the happiness increased and the suffering decreased. Obviously, if the individual has a negative spread, that is, if they've increased happiness less than they've increased suffering, or if they've decreased suffering less than they've decreased happiness, then that means, very simply, that the individual is bad. Therefore, if an individual causes a tremendous amount of happiness and suffering, one can simply determine which was higher, and use this perfect rubric to determine whether the individual was good or bad. Simple, right? The mathematists believe that the world has been going on about good and bad in the wrong way. For eons, we've been attempting to increase happiness, when instead we should have been focusing on decreasing suffering, as happiness is a fluid concept, and the more happiness you create, the harder it is to sustain, as happiness has a clear set of diminishing return. Suffering, however, is consistent. Suffering results from happiness coming to an end. Suffering is pure and eternal. For the mathematists to be supremely good, they must simply end all suffering. That is why the mathematists are working on a bomb to destroy the entire planet. By ending all life on Earth, they end an infinity of suffering into the future. With every life they avert, an entire lineage of people that would have been born into a life of suffering will no longer. Every death is a preemptive mercy killing. Every happy moment that will no longer occur pales in the face of all the sad moments that are likewise prevented. And so, as Marlborough explained, their murder cult believes that killing is a kindness. I told him that his ideas were stupid, and that he was stupid, and that now he had to go tell the man in the trench coat to go away. 6:30. The phone rang. This was strange for two reasons. First, because it was not the landline, it was the cell phone, even though we don't get cell phone service out here. And second, because it was the cell phone, the one that I took off Kiefer's body. I'll admit, I was stuck in a bit of a moral quandary ever since Carlos confided in me. On one hand, Carlos had killed someone. On the other, it was an accident, and Carlos' parole officer may not see it that way. I thought I would have had more time to figure this out, but when the cell phone started ringing, I knew I had to make a decision. I answered it. I didn't speak first. The voice on the other end was one I recognized. "You have something that belongs to my boss." It was Spencer Middleton. "His cell phone, his wallet?" I answered. "What? No, we don't care about that shit. We can buy more cell phones. We can get more wallets. You know what we want." He was right. I did. It was an accident," I explained. "We know. We want to make a deal. You give it back, and we pretend this whole thing didn't happen." Can we do that?" "Absolutely." 7:30. Carlos came in for his shift half an hour ago, and I explained the deal to him. He wasn't thrilled, but as I laid it out very clearly, he didn't have a choice. We parked Carlos's Camry behind the gas station near the growth of hand plants, and made a point to stand far enough away from them not to get our ankles grabbed. Kiefer's SUV drove up a few minutes later. Spencer was driving. He and Kiefer got out without a word, sized us up, opened up the back of the vehicle. Carlos popped his trunk. Kiefer and I stared at each other, keeping eye contact the whole time while Carlos and Spencer transferred the body from one vehicle to the other. Spencer had a tarp and blanket ready to wrap everything up. When it was over, Kiefer put a hand on my shoulder and whispered in my ear, "You done good." Then they left. Carlos started crying as I went back inside the store. It was almost daytime, and that's when the new part-timers are supposed to come in. 8. The new part-timer's late, and I'm overdue for a lunch break. I made the best of my extra time here by putting price stickers on all of the lawn gnomes. We're ringing them up as miscellaneous grocery for $9.99 each. I've already sold a couple. I'm a really good employee. 8:30. I went to the bathroom and saw a man standing there with his jeans at his ankles. He wore red and white checkered boxers and a cowboy hat. He smiled when he saw me and simply said in a somewhat sing-song voice, "Come on, man. Come on with it." I took the opportunity to ask him something that had been burning at the back of my mind. "Do you know, is everything going to be okay?" The bathroom cowboy took a second to think, then he pulled up his pants, fastened his enormous belt buckle, and walked past me, spurs clicking on the bathroom tile. He stopped for a second when he was right next to me and said plainly, "I appreciate it. Then he left. I honestly have no idea what that means. These are the entirety of the receipt paper notes, but I did make a point to continue keeping the journal. I think this will be a healthy way of chronicling the weird events at the gas station. Maybe this will even help with my condition. I don't know. The next time something strange happens, maybe I'll come back and write more. Until then, I guess this is to be continued. Edit. Sorry. Upon further inspection, I realized that some of the scribbles on the receipt paper may have been transcribed incorrectly. I also made some adjustments to the spelling and fixed some typos. While I was at it, I added another typo just for the observant reader. Lastly, upon the advice of some of my readers, I removed the part where I listed Farmer Jr.'s social security number and address. Also, special thanks to the reader that pointed out that strega isn't even a Spanish word. I asked Carlos about it when he came in for the 4th shift today, but Carlos simply looked at me blankly and told me that he doesn't speak Spanish. I should begin this entry by saying how truly sorry I am to anyone who read Part 4. I had no idea that was going to happen. The agents have assured me that every trace of the story has been removed from the internet, and that there is nothing to worry about. If you are unfortunate enough to read Part 4, I beg you, for your own sake, try to forget everything. If you experience nosebleeds, dizziness, migraines, or hallucinations, go immediately to the emergency room. If you have a reoccurring dream of an island made of song, under no circumstances should you approach or attempt to open the blue door with the painting of a crow on it. If you did not read Part 4, there is no Part 4. It doesn't exist. Forget you ever heard of it. By now, you probably already know that there is a shitty gas station at the edge of our small town. And weird things have been happening here, and weird things have been happening there. The city council has personally asked me to stop talking about it, as there have been some astute readers that have not only tracked down our small town from the brief description I've given, but actually come to visit me at work. I heard that one of them joined the Mathematists, and as far as I know, the other 2 are still missing. Once again, I'm sorry. I'm not working right now. It's the first legitimate break I've had since I started writing my stories on the receipt papers all that time ago. Time moves funny here, flowing slow and fast all at once, like molasses out of a shotgun. It's a good thing I've been keeping a journal. I've got a few moments before my laptop dies, and I think now would be the perfect time to transpose my journal entries, before the battery runs out or the blood loss gets to me. Right now, it's a race to see what happens first. Before any of you worry, I've already called Tom. He said he's on his way to give me a ride to the hospital, right after he picks up dinner for the Ledford orphans, John, Ben, and little sister. Tom and the other deputies have been taking turns checking in and bringing them food in an attempt to make the whole thing less tragic. They've been living on their own ever since the incident that totally didn't happen, and anyone that says otherwise is a damned liar. There I go again. Off on another tangent. I guess I'll get to it and type up the journal entries while I still can. 11/02/2017, 9 p.m. So much has happened here since the Halloween incident that we aren't allowed to talk about. I've been much busier than usual, dealing with the aftermath as well as the cult. The Mathematists have been cleaning out our inventory on a daily basis, planning ahead for some kind of secret event that I only get to hear about in hushed mutterings and whispers. Night is coming earlier, and the weather is getting colder. 11/03/2017, 2 a.m. The man in the trench coat is back. He's standing just outside the gas station door, staring in. He's been there for almost an hour now. On the bright side, I haven't had a customer come in since he showed up. On the not-so-bright side, I can't help but feel like he's trying to put thoughts in my head. He won't be able to, though. I've had way too much practice. Kiefer came in earlier today, before the sun went down, and sat in the booth drinking coffee for a while. Eventually, Spencer Middleton showed up. Spencer had a word with Kiefer, then came storming up to my register, screaming at the top of his lungs. He grabbed the display of lotto scratch-offs and threw it across the room. It was obvious that something had upset him, and that's when I took the earplugs out. Is everything okay?" I asked him. I knew damn well that everything was never okay. "Did you hear a word I said?" Spencer asked. I explained to him that I had taken to wearing earbuds in an effort to drown out the sounds of screaming that periodically radiate throughout the air vents. I guess the screams must have stopped a while ago, or maybe I imagined them. Either way, I didn't need the earplugs anymore. At this point, Tom walked into the store, his white hair looking even whiter than normal. Spencer, I could see, became instantly aware of the deputy's presence. "Where is he?" he half whispered, half growled. "Where's the other one?" "Carlos?" I asked. Spencer sighed. Sure, Carlos. He's not due for another 20 minutes. When he gets here, tell him that we need to have a chat." With that, Spencer Middleton let out a shrill whistle and left the store. Kiefer jumped up out of his seat and followed close behind. Tom helped me pick up the mess and put the lotto display back together without asking a single question. I wish more people could be like Tom. When Carlos got to work, he told me that he'd been having strange dreams. Dreams of something enormous, living, breathing underground. The dreams always end the same way, with the gas station collapsed into a giant sinkhole. I told him that Spencer was looking for him. That's when Carlos grew solemn and asked if he could show me something. In the freezer, behind a stack of boxes labeled non-a-prairie, whatever the hell that means. They've been here for as long as I've worked here. There is a moving blanket, and inside the blanket, there's another Kiefer. My first question for Carlos was, "You stole the body back?" He looked at the ground and shook his head sheepishly like a toddler that got busted for cooking meth. "You killed another one?" I asked. Carlos explained it was an accident. Again. 3 a.m. The man in the trench coat is finally gone. He left claw marks on the glass of the front door. I checked the security footage to confirm my suspicions. He always stays just outside the range of our cameras. Why can't I remember what his face looks like? 3:30 a.m. Marlboro was the first customer in the store after the man in the trench coat left. I told him I was surprised he was still alive. He mistook that for a compliment and said, "Thank you." I asked him if he was ready for the big event, but then he just stared at me blankly. I could tell that he had no idea what I was talking about, so I filled him in on how I figured it all out. The unusual cultist activity, the whispers, the buying up of all of our supplies. I could tell that something was about to happen. Marlboro went pale in the face as I was talking, then ran out of the gas station before I could finish, the 99-cent frozen drink still in his hand. I know I should write up an inventory loss slip for the theft, but I just can't bring myself to do it. As hard as it is to explain, just something about Marlboro makes me feel genuinely sorry for him. 6 a.m. I caught myself digging again. I don't know how long I was out there, or who was running the store while I was gone. The hole was so deep that now I nearly couldn't climb out on my own. I should maybe think about considering the possibility of one day asking a doctor if this is normal. 8 a.m. Marlboro is currently crying in the dry storage closet. Through his sobs, I can barely make out the story. Marlboro was sent on some kind of vision quest for the last week and had no idea what the other cultists had been stocking up for. When he went back to the compound earlier tonight, he found the whole place was completely deserted. Beds were left unmade. Some plates had food on them. A fire still burning in the fireplace. Everyone's clothes were still in their personal milk crates next to their sleeping bags. But the people, all of them, were simply gone. Marlboro wasn't taking this very well, but I have a business to run, so I asked Carlos to help me carry him into the dry storage area. I figured he can work through some of the stuff in there, and then maybe when he's done, he'll just, I don't know, go home. 11:04, 2017, 9 p.m. The exterminators just left. They say they got all the snakes this time, but I have my doubts. 11:05, 2017, 5 p.m. Kiefer came into the store again today and made some thinly veiled threats. He asked about Carlos too, but I told him that I was tired of being the go-to between them and that if he had business with Carlos, he needed to take it up with Carlos. That's when Kiefer started getting weird. "You know this place is just a big experiment, and you're the little mouse?" I asked Kiefer to buy something or leave, so he bought a pack of toothpaste and then started to undress in the store and rub the toothpaste on his naked body. "They say that something's wrong with your brain. Is that true?" I tried to be polite and avert my eyes as I answered, "Yeah." "You have some kind of mental condition?" I answered again, "Yeah." "That's too bad." At this point, Kiefer was completely naked. He walked over to the frozen drink machine and filled a large cup with a sugary red concoction before turning it upside down on the top of his head. Then he shook himself violently like a wet dog, flinging bits of cold, sticky debris across everything from the ceiling to the walls, some of it even landing on my face. But I tried not to let him see me flinch. I knew that this was all just an attempt to intimidate me, and I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. "What is it exactly?" he asked me as he crossed back to where his pile of clothes waited for him. "What?" I asked. "What's your condition? Paranoia? Schizophrenia? The gay?" "No," I answered. "I don't sleep." "You don't sleep?" He sounded genuinely interested. "Like, ever?" "No, I can't sleep. I haven't slept a single day since high school. It's a rare genetic condition with no cure and no treatment, and one day it will kill me. But until then, I handle the effects as best I can." Kiefer nodded. "That must be it. That must be why he can't reach you." "Why who can't reach me?" Right then, Spencer came into the store. He threw a blanket around Kiefer and ushered him out to the waiting SUV. A moment later, he came back into the store and offered me $100 for the security tape from tonight. I wonder what I'll spend my $100 on. 9 p.m. I was beginning to suspect something wasn't quite right with the store. I've been finding empty candy bar wrappers strewn about, security tapes mysteriously deleted, strange noises coming through the walls in the middle of the night when I should be alone, at least more strange noises than usual. At first, I assumed it was just the raccoons, but now I know the truth. Now I know that Marlboro has been living here for the last 2 days. He just walked out of the supply closet wearing a bathrobe, nodded at me, and then grabbed a stick of meat jerky, and then went into the bathroom. It had not even occurred to me that Marlboro had never left. 11/06/2017, 4 a.m. It finally happened. I suppose that it was only a matter of time. I know I should feel regret or shame or any of the other emotions normal people feel after something like this happens, but all I feel is embarrassed. I came to a couple hours ago, with a shovel in my hand. I had been digging again, and this time I had made some serious progress. The hole was at least 7 feet deep, the steep walls made of loose red clay. It took me a while to realize that I was staring up into an inky black night peppered with uncountable stars. When some of the bigger celestial bodies started to move, I realized that the stars were actually just the soulless red eyes of mutant raccoons staring down at me over the edge of the hole, probably looking for food. Those shameless beggars. I chucked the shovel out of the hole, and that's when I heard it. Imagine the sound of a butcher's knife hitting a watermelon, like a solid wet thwack. Now imagine the watermelon gurgling and falling over like a sack of potatoes. Oh wait. Oh man, this metaphor is really getting out of hand. When I climbed out of the hole, I saw the shovel standing upright, the business end firmly planted inside the open chest wound of a still twitching Kiefer. The Kiefer was dead before I got to his side. In a final act of defiance, he had turned both of his middle fingers up to me. I felt just the slightest amount of respect for him before I went into a mental state that I can only describe as subdued panic. The first thing I wanted to do was find something to wrap the body in because surely Spencer Middleton would come for it soon. When I went into the gas station, I was surprised to find that Marlboro had taken it upon himself to work the cash register while I was gone. He was ringing up one of our regulars, Charles, a great big fat man that always buys soap and boiled peanuts. I nabbed a tarp off the shelf and took it outside. That's when I learned something. Kiefer's heavy, like really heavy. I understand that a human body is basically just a meaty, fleshy water balloon full of guts and excrement, but nothing could prepare me for how leaky and gross and heavy a dead man can be. It was only by some miracle that I managed to drag Kiefer through the back door and into the freezer without being seen. It took all of my strength to pull the mass behind the boxes and onto a sack of the other 3, and even the cold of the freezer wasn't enough to keep me cool. As I stood there letting my breath come back to me and adrenaline wear off, I took stock of my situation. That's when it dawned on me. There were 4 Kiefers in that freezer. 4 Kiefers. Where the hell did the other two come from? The freezer door opened and Marlborough entered, dragging a dead Kiefer by the legs. He stopped and made eye contact with me. When he saw the Kiefer at my feet, I said the only thing I could think of. Well, this is awkward. Marlborough and I decided to open a bottle of Strega liquor and have a few drinks. He explained to me that he had accidentally killed Kiefer a couple of times. I totally understood. The guy's just so easy to kill. At one point, Carlos came into the freezer to grab a box of cookie dough. He didn't even acknowledge all the Kiefers. My laptop battery is currently at 2%. It's obvious now that I won't have time to transcribe the rest of my journals before it dies. I don't have time to tell you how I ended up at the bottom of this hole underneath the store with a broken leg, but I can tell you that I hear someone moving around above me, which is good because I don't think I'm alone down here. If you're reading this, it means I managed to upload my story. If you're not reading this, then I don't even know. What even are you? Someone just called my name from the top of the precipice. I think it's Carlos. I wonder what happened to Tom. Why didn't Tom ever show up? Come to think of it, I seem to remember Tom didn't survive the Halloween incident. Wait, who the hell have I been talking to this entire time? I promise that if I survive long enough to recharge my battery, I'll come back and tell the rest. Until then, I guess this is to be continued.